Lonely giant rancher found a blonde woman hanging on the roof with Kaelen lover burned into the door. Big Sky territory high in the rugged mountains of the West late summer morning, 1878. Atlas Stone, a former soldier of the Civil War, lived in exiled solitude, shunning the world he once served. His wife and child had perished in crossfire long ago, and he carried their memory not as a wound but as a ghost that shaped every quiet breath he took. He had sought refuge in this abandoned military station turned cabin, hidden among pines and granite, to escape both people and regret. On a cold dawn, Atlas awoke to a strange silhouette against the cabin's roof line, rigid in the pale morning light. He stepped outside, the pine needles crunching under stiffened boots, and saw her, a blonde woman hanging motionless from the roof's ridge beam, feet dangling, hair brushing the burnt letters scorched into the door below. A Kaelen lover, his stomach clenched, he approached, heart pounding, the sky still half dark behind him. The smell of charred wood stung his nose, raw and accusing. He reached into his coat for his pistol, only to realize that instinctively he had no will to shoot. To kill was no longer what he feared least. Not here, not now. When he leaned closer, he saw her chest rise and fall, slow and uneven, not dead, but dying. Her skin was pale, cheeks stained with dirt and dried blood, eyes closed tight. Her breathing was shallow, but unmistakably alive. Atlas blinked, disbelief rippled through him. He braced himself under her arms and lifted, feeling her weight lean into his strength. Fragile as a bird, he slung her over his shoulder with careful purpose, ignoring the ache in muscles unused to tenderness. As he descended the slope behind the cabin, the world seemed to shift. The forest held its breath, but then the silence was shattered by the sharp crack of gunfire, echoing in bursts that rattled the pines, distant, urgent, threatening. Someone knew she was not dead. Someone had seen her, perhaps hunted her. Atlas tightened his grip on the unconscious woman, her pulse fluttering against his back. He did not falter. He ran, boots skidding on loose stone, branches clawing at his coat toward the lean-to he had been made near Whispering Falls. Safety was a few slow minutes away, but in that time each step felt like salvation or bloodlust in pursuit. When he reached the edge of the clearing, with ragged pines behind and his rough shelter ahead, he dared to hope that no one else had followed. He eased down, gently, laying her on a bed of furs and blankets he kept for emergencies. Her hair, tangled and golden, spilled across the furs like sunlight trapped in cloth. He knelt and lifted her chin. Her eyelashes fluttered. She breathed deeper, a single shaky gasp. He exhaled without noticing he had been holding it. In the still, air. Air. The only sound was her ragged inhalation and the distant echo of fear beyond the trees. He knelt in the morning light, listening to her breathing, as though it were a secret only he was allowed to hear. He could not yet think about what came next, or who had done this, or why. He only knew that she was alive, and that he would not let her die here, not by wood or flame or vengeance. Outside the forest seemed to pulse with renewed life, the pines whispering above, the distant gunshots gone silent for now, and Atlas listened, heart pounding as he waited for her eyes to open. She burned with fever through the first day and the next. Atlas did what he could, cleaned her wounds, bathed her head in cool water drawn from the spring behind the cabin, wrapped her limbs in linen stripped from old shirts. She stirred only once, whispering one name like a broken string repeating in the wind. Kaelen. It haunted the silence. That night, while the fire crackled low, she woke in a panic. Her arms flailed, her breath turned sharp. She screamed and reached toward her neck, clawing for something invisible. "Get away, let me go, I'll die before you take me back." Atlas moved fast, grabbed her wrists, not harsh, but firm. She struggled hard, teeth clenched, legs kicking wildly. "You're safe," he said calmly. "You're not there anymore." She didn't believe him. Her eyes darted, filled with terror. Then she lunged toward the fireplace, reaching for the blade he used to split kindling. He caught her around the waist and pulled her back hard against him. "Don't," he said, voice low. "Not like this. Not when you made it this far." Her body trembled, her breath hitched. For a moment, she sagged in his arms like someone who had run too far and realized there was still more road to go. He loosened his hold. She turned slowly, her voice cracked and wary. "Who are you?" "Name's Atlas," he said. "Stone, this is my place. Or what's left of it? You found me?" He nodded. Her eyes lowered. She sat on the floor, legs folded beneath her, arms wrapped around her chest like a child holding herself together. Then, after a long silence, she whispered, "My name is Willow. Willow Thorn." Atlas froze. Thorn. The name hit like a musket shot to the chest. He had not heard it in years, but once it had been inked across the orders that sent mercenaries into Apache lands. Orders signed by Silas Thorn, plantation baron, cattle lord, and self-proclaimed purifier of borders. "He," Willow continued, unaware of Atlas's shifting gaze. "He's my father," she said flatly. "Or was." Atlas said nothing. "I ran away years ago after he hit me for the last time." Her voice grew tight. "I didn't just run. I followed someone. Kaelen, he saved me when I was bleeding in the creek behind our land, said I wasn't the enemy, said no one's born one." "You loved him," Atlas said softly. She nodded. "We lived in the canyons far from everything. I learned his language, wore his mother's beads, slept under the stars." A tear ran down her cheek. "They came for us last winter. White men, some I recognized that my father paid. They ambushed us." She shook her head as if denying the memory could kill it. "Kaelen died protecting me. I saw him fall. I didn't scream. I couldn't." "They took you," Atlas said. She raised her sleeve. The bruises had faded, but the burns hadn't. "They called me witch, a Kaelen lover. They said I shamed my blood. They tied me up, dragged me town to town, then they left me hanging." Her voice broke to make sure no girl ever tried to love someone like him again. Atlas looked at her, his jaw clenched tight. The fire hissed. His hands had balled into fists before he even knew it. Her story stirred something old and bitter. Memories of campfires lit too close to smoke and blood. Of children screaming in languages no one bothered to understand. Willow fell silent, her eyes drooped with exhaustion and humiliation. "You can hate me," she whispered. "Everyone else does." Atlas sat beside her on the floor, staring into the flame. His voice was a breath. "I don't hate you." She turned toward him slowly. "You think I betrayed my kind?" she said. "No," he said. "I think the ones who say that never knew what love looked like." She blinked. Her lip trembled. "I should have died with him." Atlas reached for the fire poker, stirred the embers, and whispered without looking at her. "You didn't, and that ain't betrayal. That's survival. Only cowards fear a soul brave enough to love across a line." Willow lowered her face to her hands, and for the first time since her world burned, she cried without shame. The fire burned low that night, casting long, trembling shadows against the wooden walls. Atlas sat outside the cabin beneath the moonlight, a tin cup of black coffee untouched in his hands. His eyes stared out into the woods, but he was not seeing trees or stars. He was seeing fire. 15 years ago, the flames had danced higher than the roofs of the village. The screams had been louder than the rifle cracks. Atlas had stood at the edge of a burning Apache settlement, one his unit had been ordered not to harm, but it had not mattered. Not to the men with torches, not to the ones drunk on hatred and the thrill of blood. The village had been an ally, peaceful women and children mostly, but they were too close to the Thorn estate, and the whispers of mingling were enough to bring in the fires. He had gone back once the dust had settled, looking for survivors. Instead, he had found his wife crumpled by the riverbank, struck by a stray shot, his daughter limp beside her, caught in the frenzy. They had been visiting, bringing food to a midwife friend. Wrong place, wrong day, wrong skin color, maybe. No one ever answered. The man who led that purge, who signed the map and named the targets, had been Cyrus Blackwood. The same fanatic who had once declared hybrids and sympathizers must be purged. The same man whose hatred needed no justification, just a match and a reason. Atlas had buried his family with his own hands. Then he had disappeared into the mountains, vowing never to draw a weapon again, never to stand with one side over another, never again to be a part of any war. Until now. Inside the cabin, Willow slept fitfully. She had curled up in the far corner, wrapped in wool and silence. Her fever had broken, but not the nightmares. That morning, she had found his old rifle under the floorboards. She'd brought it to him, confused and cold-eyed. "This is yours." He nodded. "The trigger's gone." He had removed it the day he buried his daughter, left the metal buried beside her, a vow no bullet could rewrite. "I don't shoot anymore," he said. She stared at him. "Not even if they come back for me." He said nothing. She didn't argue, just handed him the useless rifle and walked away, shoulders heavy with all the battles she wasn't ready to fight. That afternoon, Atlas began rebuilding the old shelter deeper in the woods. A half-ruined hunter's hut, he had abandoned it long ago. He fixed the roof, cleared the overgrowth, and replaced the shattered door. He laid down new blankets, rebuilt the fire pit with his bare hands, not because she asked, because it gave her space, because it gave her dignity. When she found it the next morning, she stood silently in the doorway, staring at the small vegetable patch he had begun, rows of potato sprouts, sprigs of thyme, wild onions. Healing would not come fast, but it would come. Willow turned to him, eyes wide and wet. "You built this for me?" He nodded once. "I never asked. You didn't need to." For a long moment she said nothing. Then she stepped into the hut, sat on the edge of the bedding, and stared at the soil outside like it held the bones of her past. He watched her shoulders tremble, and then, soundless and slow, she began to cry. Not the wild sobs of grief, but the aching, quiet release of someone who hadn't let herself weep since death first knocked. Atlas didn't speak. He didn't move closer. He let her be. As this wasn't about being saved, it was about surviving together, but alone when needed. The forest whispered around them, and for the first time in years, the giant, 7 feet and muscular rancher, who thought he had nothing left to give, gave something more lasting than bullets. He gave her shelter, he gave her peace, and in return, she gave him the first tears of trust. The wind carried more than pine needles that morning. It carried voices, low, distant, angry. Rumors spread fast through towns like Ember Creek, but lies traveled faster, and by noon that day they reached the ears of men who had always been looking for an excuse to clean the land with blood. Kaelen lovers still breathing. Cyrus Blackwood sat in a smoky saloon 2 towns south, with his boots on the table and a bottle in hand when the whisper reached him. A rider from the foothills had seen something. A flash of blonde hair near the old station, a stranger moving through the woods. Cyrus stood slow, his hand twitched near his belt where the old revolver hung. "You sure?" he asked. The rider nodded. "A giant, 7 feet and muscular rancher's hiding her. One of your old boys said he saw the tracks. Woman's print, small, recent." Cyrus's grin was full of old hate. "She's a ghost. We should have burned the first time. Let's finish it right." By nightfall he had 6 riders saddled. No badges, just men who hated silence and mixed bloodlines. Meanwhile, up in the hills, a knock sounded at Atlas's door. He opened it, hand behind the frame. A local trader stood nervously on the step, hat in hand. "I don't want no trouble, Stone," he said, "but you ought to know. There's a bounty, quiet one, posted in coins and cattle. A Kaelen lover's head brings it in real clean." Atlas said nothing. The trader looked down, ashamed. "I seen you once with her near the creek. Just figured you ought to know what's coming." He left as quickly as he came. Inside the cabin, Willow heard every word. She packed her bag before Atlas could speak. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "I have to go. They'll kill you if they find me here. They'll kill you if you go." She looked at him, her eyes hard. "You saved me once. I'm not asking you to do it twice." Atlas took a breath, stepped forward. "I lost a wife and child because I followed orders. I stood still when I should have spoken, watched fire take everything and called it fate. I won't do that again." She opened her mouth, but he wasn't done. "You're not baggage. You're not a burden. You're a human being, and I'm done pretending the world gets to decide which ones are worth protecting." Her shoulders dropped, but her gaze did not. "They'll come." "I know," he said. That night, Atlas went into the woods alone. He moved like a shadow, quiet, calculated, unseen. He had not touched a weapon in years, but that didn't mean he had forgotten how to survive. He laid traps not to kill, but to slow. Alarm wires made of old tins and broken glass. Trip branches along the ridge, a silent perimeter of warnings, not violence. When he returned, the sky was starting to bruise with dawn. Willow waited by the fire, her fingers wrapped around a mug of cooling tea. "You could have run," she said quietly. "I could have," he replied. "Why didn't you?" He looked at her a long time. "Because I've seen men fight to possess, to own, to chain. That's not why I'm here." "Then why?" He set a hand gently on the table between them, not touching her, just close. "I just want you to live." She didn't speak. Her throat tightened too fast for words. No one had ever said that to her before, not even Kaelen. People had wanted her silent, loyal, useful, beautiful. No one had simply wanted her breathing. And in that moment, for the first time in her life, Willow Thorne didn't feel like someone running. She felt seen. Behind them, the woods remained still, but beyond the ridges, hoofbeats had started, quiet, yet growing. The war wasn't done, but neither were they. The wind shifted after sundown. Atlas felt it first, not in the trees, but in his gut. A tight pull, the quiet before something sharp. He rose from the cot and checked the traps. 3 were tripped, no sound, no warning, but someone had passed through. Carefully, deliberately. He returned to the cabin and opened the door without a word. Willow looked up from the fire, eyes wide. "They're here," she asked. Atlas nodded once. "Stay inside," he said, pulling on his old coat. "No lights, no sound." She stood. "I can help. I need you alive more than I need help." And then he was gone, melted into the woods like a shadow sliding between branches. 3 men moved through the forest with hunting knives and rope. One had a scar down his cheek, another a limp. The third carried a bottle of kerosene in one hand and a noose in the other. Atlas took the high ground, crouched among pine roots, watching. The men whispered as they crept toward the rebuilt shelter, laughing low. "Bet she's pretty when she begs. Better if she's half dead. Easier to string." Atlas moved fast. He dropped behind the last one and struck hard, elbow to throat, blade to wrist, just enough to knock him unconscious. The second turned, caught a punch full in the jaw before he could raise his weapon. But the third spotted the movement and shouted, drawing a revolver. Gunfire cracked through the trees. Back at the cabin, Willow heard it. She froze, then grabbed the oil lantern, flint, and one desperate idea. Outside, Atlas fought like a man who hated violence but understood it too well. He dodged, rolled, kicked, but they were faster now. 2 against 1, blades flashing. Then came light. Not from the moon, from the trees. Flames roared up the dry underbrush in a sudden bloom of gold. The fire Willow started leapt from bush to branch, devouring everything in its path. Heat poured over the forest like breath from hell itself. The attackers turned, shouting, blinded by the smoke. Atlas used the moment, striking fast, breaking the leg of one, dragging the other into the dirt before fleeing. He ran toward the glow, toward the danger, because that was where she was. Willow stood near the base of a ridge, her dress singed, hair damp with sweat, holding a burning stick like a sword. She coughed once, eyes searching. When Atlas reached her, he didn't speak, just grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the ravine trail. They ran, together, half choking, half burning, until they reached the mouth of an old bear-claw cavern nestled deep in the canyon wall, a place Atlas had once used during winter patrols. Inside, the air was cool, safe, but barely. Atlas collapsed first, then pulled her down beside him. They lay there in the dark, breath heavy, skin marked with soot and ash. She winced as he gently brushed the hair from her face. A long lock had burned at the ends, singed into a brittle curl. "You set the woods on fire," he said, almost a smile in his voice. "Just a little," she rasped. "You could have died." She met his gaze. "I know." He paused, his fingers still tangled in the remains of her hair. "Would you have died for me?" Willow swallowed, the question cracking something open. "No," she whispered. "I want to live for you." The cave fell silent except for their breath and the distant pop of burning pine. But inside them something deeper had caught fire, and this one they would not run from. The town of Ember Creek was the kind of place where shadows moved faster than gossip. Atlas hadn't walked its streets in years, not since the war, not since the smoke and screams. But now he stood in the back of a crowded trading post, face under a wide-brimmed hat, listening. "Cyrus Blackwood's coming, and by week's end," one man said over a barrel of sugar and dried beans. "Got business with Mayor Albright, or maybe something more personal." "Personal like bounty hunting," another muttered. Atlas stiffened. He turned and walked out, the bell over the door tinkling behind him. Down the hill at the edge of town, Willow waited in a wagon they'd borrowed from a farmer. Her hood was drawn low, but her eyes scanned every rider, every glint of silver on a belt. When Atlas approached, she spoke without looking. "Did you hear his name?" "Yes." "Then it's him." She reached into her satchel and pulled out the scorched piece of tanned leather, half burned, blackened at the corners. It had been nailed to the door of the old signal post when Atlas found her strung up. It bore one word, scorched in with a hot brand: a Kaelen lover. Atlas had always thought the burn marks were random symbols of hate, not handwriting. But now, under the sunlight, Willow ran her fingers along the edges. The angle of the A, the way the P dips below the line. This was branded by hand, not stamp. "And you recognize it?" Willow nodded. "Cyrus used to write letters to my father. Threats, warnings, offers. They had a shared hatred. Only difference was my father used gold. Cyrus used fire, letters to your father, and one to Kaelen." Her voice cracked. Atlas stayed quiet. He threatened to hang Kaelen from the town gates, called him a mud-skinned thief. He wrote it all in a twisted cursive, just like this. She held up the leather again. Her hands didn't shake anymore. Atlas took it from her and stared at the seared word. "He's not just hunting us," he said. "He's hunting memory. He wants everyone who ever loved an Apache to suffer," Willow whispered. "He wants the world to forget people like Kaelen ever existed. Then we need to remind them Atlas had no badge, no army, no allies. But he had a truth and a fire inside that hadn't burned in 15 years. They made camp near the foothills outside Ember Creek. Atlas crafted a plan built not from bullets, but from proof. That night they visited the old parish archives in town, the old parlor behind the chapel where donations and letters were stored. Willow remembered a letter her father had once burned after reading a letter from Cyrus warning about his daughter's dishonor. It was still there, the half-charred draft copy. The church had required documentation when her father donated land for tax forgiveness. That letter contained the threat, the slur, and the unmistakable handwriting. Atlas took it and wrapped it tight. Next, they rode to the sheriff's outpost. The new deputy was young, but he listened. Atlas laid down the piece of branded leather, the letter from Cyrus, and told him everything without shaking, without asking for trust. "We're not here to hang anyone," Atlas said. "We're here to show you the rope." The deputy looked between them, then nodded. "Cyrus arrives Friday. He's been gathering men. But if this is true, people ought to know who they're letting into their homes." Willow stepped forward. "I don't need them to love me. I just need them to see me as a person, not a lesson." Atlas looked at her, pride flickering in his chest. They were no longer fugitives. They were witnesses. The fight wasn't over, but the silence was. Ember Creek had not seen a crowd this size in years. The townsfolk gathered near the town square, not because they were ordered, but because they were curious. Rumors had flown all week of a giant, 7 feet and muscular rancher, a traitor woman, and a war ghost coming home to stir old ashes. Atlas Stone stood beneath the midday sun, sweat lining his brow, but his voice did not falter. Before him sat Mayor Albright, the town's reluctant moderator, and beside the mayor, a small panel of elders and deputies pretending not to grip the arms of their chairs too tightly. "I have here," Atlas began, holding up a packet, a letter written by Cyrus Blackwood to Silas Thorne, accusing his own daughter of shame, calling for the death of the man she loved. A murmur ran through the crowd. Atlas laid the letter on the table, then held up a burned piece of leather, and this found nailed to a cabin where that same girl was left to die. Branded by hand. The same script, the same slur. He looked out over the people. Many avoided his gaze. A few didn't. Next came the photograph. Atlas pulled it from his coat pocket. A grainy image from the war. Black and white, stained by time. It showed a line of soldiers outside a burning Apache village. One man stood at the front, tall, bearded, with a distinctive long-barreled revolver slung at his side. "That weapon," Atlas said, turning toward the panel, "is unique. Custom trigger guard, double-checked hammer. Only 6 were ever made for field captains under the Big Sky Territory militia. One of them belonged to Cyrus Blackwood." Cyrus stood to the side, arms crossed. He had not spoken yet. Now he did. "This is a circus," he barked. "These are war stories, accusations from a recluse and a woman who betrayed her own blood." Someone in the crowd murmured agreement. Cyrus's voice rose. "We're talking about people who consorted with murderers, who welcomed savages into their bed. What's next? Will we let them raise our children?" A few nods rippled through the square, but not all. Then came the quiet interruption. "I was there," a voice croaked. An old man stepped from the shade near the sheriff's office, bent back, white-bearded, one hand clutched a wooden cane. "I was the field surgeon under the militia the night of the Ember Creek raid." Atlas stepped aside. Dr. Eli Vance approached the platform slowly, knees shaking but voice steady. Cyrus gave the order. No quarter, no captives. He said he wanted the land washed clean. We attacked before dawn, burned everything. That was the night Atlas's wife and daughter died. Cyrus scoffed. Lies from a dying drunk. The doctor looked at him, eyes red-rimmed but clear. "You buried your guilt in whiskey. I buried mine in silence, but only one of us still dreams of fire." The mayor turned pale. Others in the crowd lowered their heads. And then Willow stepped forward. No escort, no shame. She walked to the front of the crowd, hands at her sides, then, without a word, reached behind and untied the back of her blouse. Gasps cut the silence. Across her back were long, twisted scars. Raised like rope, some still red around the edges, wounds that could not be hidden by time or fabric. Willow's voice was soft but carried. These weren't left by Apache blades. They weren't made in the woods by tribal men. They were given to me by white hands, Christian hands, men who said they were saving me from sin. She faced the crowd now, eyes unwavering. Kaelen didn't chain me. He taught me how to grow food with one hand and shoot a hawk with the other. He didn't own me. He listened to me, and he died protecting me. She turned toward Cyrus. "You didn't hang me to punish love. You did it to silence it." Silence hung over the square like ash. No one clapped, no one shouted, but no one looked at Cyrus the same again. The truth had been spoken, not from pulpits or guns, but from skin and memory. The fire of justice had not burned out, it had just begun. Cyrus Blackwood was sentenced by his own kind, words sharp as bullets, truths heavier than iron. He was taken away without honor, without a crowd to cheer. The town of Ember Creek, once proud of its silence, now found strength in listening. Atlas and Willow did not stay to watch the gallows built. They left the next morning before sunrise, riding toward the hills, where no names mattered, only breath, earth, and sky. It took them 3 days to reach the ridge. The Solitude Ridge homestead was still there, though the door hung loose and the windows were cracked. Atlas fixed it first, not with urgency, but with care. Willow gathered pine needles for bedding and stripped bark to boil for pain medicine. They moved like they had done it before, like the place had been waiting. Weeks passed. They cleared space, dug a well, planted beans and squash. Atlas built an extra room with hands that remembered more than war. Willow painted the door with blue ash from wildflowers. "For peace," she said, smiling softly. People started to arrive. A boy whose parents had thrown him out for marrying a Cheyenne girl. A woman with a scar down her cheek and nowhere else to go. A wounded horse limping from a hunter's bullet. The cabin became a place not of exile, but of return. Atlas watched it grow and felt something in his chest uncoil. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the ridge line, staining the mountains red gold, he walked up the path to where Willow stood near the split-rail fence. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't kneel. He just stood there, dust on his boots, hat in hand, eyes steady. "You don't need to say yes," he murmured. "There's no ring, no preacher, no whiskey toast." She turned toward him slowly. "I just need to know," he continued, "that you'll still be here when the sun drops behind that tree." And the next night, and the next, she stepped closer, hands resting lightly on his shirt. Kaelen was only my first storm. He broke the locks on my cage. He taught me fire. She reached up and touched Atlas's face. "But you," her voice trembled, "you taught me stillness. That love doesn't have to be lightning to be real, that it can be the sound of wood creaking under moonlight, the scent of smoke on flannel." Atlas said nothing. He only closed his eyes, forehead resting against hers. She whispered, "Tomorrow is memory. You are tomorrow." They didn't wed by law. They didn't take vows before witnesses. But from that night on, the wind seemed quieter through the trees, and the fire inside the cabin never burned out. Months later, a letter was found tucked inside the pages of a donated book at the Ember Creek schoolhouse. It bore no signature, but the handwriting was elegant, feminine, steady. "I was once loved by a warrior who held my heart in his hands like a blade, fierce, bright, and sharp, with the weight of 1,000 battles. Now I live with a man who holds my heart like soil, soft, steady, and strong enough to plant something in. Kaelen taught me how to fight. The other taught me how to stay. I have learned that love is not proven in how loud you shout or how far you run. It is proven in how long you stay, when the fire is out and the nights are quiet. He is not my captor. He is not my savior. He is simply the one who stayed, and that is enough. In the heart of a land carved by wind and fire, 2 souls once broken by war, by blood, by loss, found something they never thought they'd feel again. Not just survival, but peace. Not just memory, but a reason to stay. Atlas and Willow were never crowned by a church bell or praised in a history book, but their story remains in the cabin on the ridge, in the blue wild flowers that bloom every spring, and in the quiet, knowing that love, when chosen freely, can outlast even the deepest scars. Thank you for watching this story on Wild West Love Stories, where hearts still dare to beat in the dust and silence of the frontier. If this tale moved you, if it made you believe in second chances, in love that heals, and in the strength of choosing kindness over fear, subscribe to Wild West Love Stories and rides with us again. Because out here, every love leaves a trail.